Good morning and greetings to each one of you. Thank you again, Dennis, for moderating this morning. Thank you for being here today. And a special blessings to all the mothers that are here with us this morning, although not all are called to be mothers, but we realize that mothers play a very important role in the life of society around us and in the world around us. If you would think about the animal kingdom, and you see in some of the species of animals, you would see the fierceness that a mother of the animals would protect her young. We understand that there is a tremendous amount of loyalty there to the offspring, even though the animal not necessarily chooses at times, but it's the instinct within that they are an inborn nature within, that they are born within them, that they go to their death, perhaps many times, to defend their young. And we see that in a profound way in the animal kingdom around us. And there's very little animals that have young, and they are basically left on their own. There's only a few. And that list is very short as we think about the animal kingdom. And as we think about Mother's Day, I thought about Mother's Day and the message for mothers, and I thought, I wonder how many times I have shared on Mother's Day, but that's okay. I think it is important to as a nation or as a people to honor our mothers, because they have a tremendous role. They play a tremendous role in life in a time if you think about our own lives as young children, where we didn't appreciate it, or we didn't understand the sacrifice, maybe is the word I should use, that our parents did on our behalf or for our own benefit. So it takes us years, or make a tremendous difference in our lives. How we view that is if we're parents ourselves and we understand the sacrifices that come with parenting and raising a family. And of course, with that, I am in a fast approaching the time in my life where I think about it maybe on a daily, weekly basis at times, that I question myself whether I have done enough or have done enough of teaching when the children were young, because if I have not, the door is closing very fast, because there's a day and age where children have to make decisions for themselves, and am I going to allow them to do that, and to still give direction, but understand that there's a day and age when they need to make decisions for themselves as well. So that's, of course, somewhat scary, and maybe it makes you really wonder where have we done enough, is what I think about a lot recently. And also, this morning, maybe there's not as many young people or youth here. Understand the junior high and high school are at a different congregation this morning, sharing their songs that they shared at the program here at Pleasant Valley, so they're not with us this morning. The youth benches look a little empty this morning, but that's where they are at this morning. I invite your attention to the book of Proverbs, and we're going to look at some verses in chapter 1. Proverbs, of course, is a book that was a lot of collection of different writings, but we also attribute this book a lot to Solomon, which we know as the wisest man, or the man that had a tremendous amount of wisdom. And this morning as we think about Mother's Day. We can't this morning. I will also be some in here. It's not just for the mothers, but it's for parents in general, maybe more so this morning for our message of the morning. And so I'd like to read a few verses in the beginning of Proverbs and then jump down and skip a few and start reading again. Proverbs 1, verse 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the word of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, and to young man knowledge and discretion. And it says, a wise man will hear and increase learning, a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsel. And now I'll just continue reading. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. Here's where I want to start reading, especially giving instruction to, gives an in-depth instruction here. It says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother, for they shall be an ornament of grace about thy head and chains about thy neck. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. And it continues on there, talking about sinners enticing the person. For they say, come with us. But we'll stop reading there for now. I would like to take a closer look at verses 7 to 10. And if you, for maybe a title for the message this morning, I would like to title this message, Teaching with Purpose. And so that includes not only the mother, but it also includes fathers as well. So we're not just going to be looking at mothers this morning. So Solomon here, maybe started in my Bible, it would look like Solomon would start a new thought here in verse 7 where it says the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of God, or the awareness of God, or the awareness or the respect for God, the reverence for God is the beginning of knowledge. And as a people here this morning, I do not believe that there's a whole lot of people in this audience that have not been taught or have not been instructed as a young child to acknowledge that there is a God. I think most of us here this morning had parents that tried to do their best or tried to do the best to their ability at what they were given or to the knowledge that they had to raise a family that honors God. But it's the end of verse 7 says, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So there is, of course, two sides to wisdom and knowledge, or there's two sides to being a person that's open to instruction, or a person that says that's foolishness, and we carve out a direction in life that will lead us to debauchery and will lead us to a lot of regrets. In verse 8, Solomon says, my son, hear the instruction of thy father. So as parents here this morning, or as people that have children, as fathers, we have the opportunity, we have a lot of tools. We have a lot, of course, the Bible. We have a lot of scripture in the Bible as well that gives us some instructions or guidance to how we are to instruct our families. But it says, my son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. This would have the context maybe of this writing more is that Solomon is saying to the child or to the youth or to the young person, hear the instruction or take note or pay attention to what you are trying to be taught. And the instruction of the father and forsaking not the law of thy mother has serious consequences, or has lifelong consequences when we do not heed to what Solomon, or God's word, I should say, is trying to tell us here this morning. As we think about forsaking not the law of thy mother, that word law there is basically meaning a precept or a statute. And the word precept or statute is probably not words that we use every day. But the idea of forsaking not the law of thy mother is the idea that we don't forsake the rule of conduct. The rule of conduct, and that word statute would mean the authoritatively declared rule. So we think about the father giving instruction, and we think about the mother making some law or rules for conduct, and authoritatively declared rules as they instruct or as they raise children. Now, we understand in the day and age that we live that a lot of us, most of us in this congregation, have day jobs, that we are not in the home during the day. And we, in generations past, that was maybe somewhat unusual, but in the generation that we live in, or a lot of us find ourselves today, that we are not in the home during the day. And we understand, or hopefully as a father or as a husband here this morning, that you understand that there's maybe a lot more responsibility placed on the wife or on the moms of our day to do a lot of maybe the teachings and a lot of the instructing to the families that God has blessed us with, and that places a tremendous amount of responsibility on our wives and how their day or how the stress of the day could be going, especially when there's young children in the home. And I believe it has been said, or it's been maybe proven that a lot of, or it's been shared across this pulpit probably before, that a lot of the teachings or the instruction or the training of a child should be done or should be far advanced before they ever get to the age of going to school. And therefore, when we think about that, and as a father, as I think about that, and the time I was away from home when the children were young, or when there was young children in the home, that the tremendous amount of the responsibility of teaching and instructing went to my wife and the responsibilities that she had. But as a father here, as Solomon's talking here, it says, hear the instruction of the father. The father plays a tremendous role, though, that we don't, as a father or as a husband, when we do come home or do spend time in the home, that we should never find ourselves when we are absent from the home. We should never find ourselves coming home and ridiculing the authority or the lack of authority thereof of the mom when she has spent the day with the children that have been taxing and very, very trying, as she has spent her day at home trying to keep rule and order in the house. But I'm not saying there's never time for that, but I believe this morning that if there is time for that, please, as husbands, let us not make those types of comments or those types of attitudes in front of our children, whether they are young or whether they're older. There is time for discussion. There is time where we need to, as parents, discuss the rule or the conduct that we have set in place, or the conduct we like to see for our children. There is room for discussion for that, but there's never room, I believe, this morning for ridicule when it comes to the husband or the wife in front of our children about the lack thereof of rule or authority in our home, because that can manipulate or make the children to choose between father or mother which one may be right or they will overhear and or think in their mind that there's conflict here and which there may be. But Solomon here is saying the instruction of the father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. And the mother places, and like I said, today's mother, the idea or the mother in the home today has a tremendous responsibility to teach, and especially young children. And I realized that as a family, when we were in the thick of that, there was times when I just thought it would be so nice. It would be so nice to sit at the table and have some adult conversation around our table. Well, now I'm there, and at times I would think it'd be so nice to have those young children around the table again, where you can so nicely instruct so I'm not saying I'm regretting it. I'm just saying at times it's like, well, Yeah, we wish for things, or we think about these things, and then the time gets there, and then we think, well, how nice was it when they were young, and when you could easily, or quite a bit easier to instruct, and to the day and age where the children were at the age where mom and dad were on the pinnacle of wisdom and knowledge, and I think you know what I'm saying. But that doesn't mean that I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that it's not that way at all in our household. I'm just saying things have changed to some degree, and I think as parents, I think you would understand that. And if we, as parents, fathers and mothers, do our job, do our God-given responsibility in having rules for conduct and have authoritative declared rules in our house, the law of the mother or an instruction of the father, verse 9 says, "For they shall be an ornament of grace about the head and chains about thy neck. They shall be a guidance and direction for life." And the grace about the head, or it will give you an advantage on life, or an advantage into the avenue of experiencing life far above the general population, or a person or a child that had very little discipline or direction or positive influence in their life. And I understand that at times God has allowed children to go through some horrible things. You can read books, autobiographies of people that have experienced horrible things in their lives. I guess The Child Called It or something. I haven't read that in many years, but there's books that were written of children that have experienced horrible things that a child should never experience, but have risen above them later in life and have used that experience to help other people to see that there is hope, or there is a way to rise above some of those things. But as parents here today, or as a person, as we would reflect back to our childhood, I would say that I had a very normal childhood, and I had a very secure childhood, and that I was set, or that I had an advantage as a youth to make a tremendous. I had the opportunity to make tremendous choices early in life to be a godly person. And to my shame this morning, as I have shared with you already, that I spurned that, or I didn't heed to that, and it took me some years to realize that I have wasted far too many years, and had to come back and to realize that that was not the direction that I wanted for my life, as I seen my life spinning out of control and not being a person that I wanted to be, or realizing that God is outside of the blood of Jesus Christ cleansing my life, that I would be forever lost in the direction that I was in, or where I was at in life. So here, when we have parents, when we have the father and the mother that takes their teaching seriously, teaching with purpose, that we have the children, it doesn't necessarily have to be children. There's people in this audience this morning that have vocations that have tremendous influence on children that are not their own children. So it's not just that you would say, well, I'm not a mother or a parent here this morning, but you can, if you have interest in reaching children, or being in a children's ministry. We have that avenue in our circles to be a tremendous influence on children, whether they are your own or not. But when father or mother take their responsibility in the home seriously, and we teach with purpose, that we as have given our children a tremendous advantage when it comes to making choices in life that would lead them in a right direction. And this brings us up to verse 10, which when Solomon says all this, he says, then it kind of changes thought, or kind of changes direction. Verse 10 says, my son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. That turns the thought around that, there's a host of stuff out there that will bombard you. There's a host of, basically what Solomon's saying, shun evil. But I would like to suggest or maybe not suggest, or maybe we should read it this way. My son, if sinners, it's not if sinners, it's when sinners entice thee, consent thou not. We don't live a life that is so sheltered that we don't, as youth or as maybe older children, it's not if these things come into our lives. It's when they come. It's when it's going to happen. And all of us remember the struggles or the issues we faced in life as we got older and got out to make some of our own decisions in life. But the invitation may sound so good. And verse 11 says, if they say, come with us, there's enticement there. They want to draw you in and make it look so glamorous and so fun or so enticing to people that they want to. It'll swallow you up. It'll swallow you alive, them up alive and whole. And then Solomon does not paint a beautiful picture of the sinners that want to entice you. But we as parents understand, as I shared already, that as our children get older, it's not that there's that sense of fear within me that I think that I can't allow my children to make decisions in their lives, but that I still have that relationship with them where I can give some guidance and direction, and then let them make the ultimate choice. But not that we as parents think, well, now they're older and they got their own decisions, they got their own path in life to make, but that we can, if we keep that relationship open, we keep that dialogue open, that they will want to come to us and ask for some direction or some counsel, that we have the teaching or the wherewithal or the influence on our older children's lives, that we won't just shut them down and say, well, that's not for you, or we want to make the decision for them without trying to just help them along and tell them that it's, after I've shared with you, you need to make your own decision. And I'm preaching to myself when I think about the age where our family, or the family that God has blessed us with. The idea that as young children, so this morning, teaching with purpose, those of you in our audience this morning who have young children in the home, especially those that before preschool, you have a tremendous opportunity and age where those children can be taught in a way that will follow them for life and influence them for life and give them an advantage that they won't understand till later in life. And I will share more on that a little bit later. Turn to Proverbs chapter 6. I want to show you a few verses here that almost basically say the same thing as chapter 1 did. Proverbs 6, verses 20 to 24. Here again, some of these verses are addressed, my son. Solomon goes through, but we want to start at verse 20. This is right after Solomon talks about, or the writings, 6 things that God hates, 7 are abomination to him. Then in verse 20 he says, my son, keep thy father's commandment, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Bind them continually upon thine heart, and tie them about thy neck. When thou goest, it shall lead thee. When thou sleepest, it shall keep thee. And when thou awakest, it shall talk with thee. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. To keep thee from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. And it talks about the adulterous woman who would want to lure you in. So here, Solomon is giving instruction. Again, it talks about the father's commandment, or the father's instruction, and it talks about the law of thy mother. There again, it's the rule of conduct, or the authoritative declared rule for life. And as you think about your home today, as you think about my home where we live today, there is rules, and there is rule for conduct, and there is a set of rules that we try not to change. It's consistent. This is something that as a family we want. This is something that today this rule is enforced, tomorrow it may not. So this morning again, as we think about mothers, as we think about raising children, the idea of consistency. When we allow one thing one day and not the other day, or bring severe punishment for it the other day, brings confusion into the life of a young child, and it gives very little direction of whether it will be okay today or not. So consistency or teaching with purpose or having rules that don't change in the home is something that is very beneficial to the life of children, and they know that rule is not going to change, and if it's violated, that there will be consequences. So we have, hopefully as a family, or as parents, we have established some of them, and do take the time to enforce or to make sure that they are followed. Now, as parents or as fathers and mothers, parenting or teaching takes time, and no one is more keenly aware of that, about the teaching takes time, than probably I myself. And I do struggle at times to make or take the time to properly. At times I think about something, I need to talk to this child or that child. I should have some dialogue with them. Well, at times you should just do it right away, or make sure it happens, because if you're like me, you think about this and you want to have this discussion, but through the busyness or the activities of life, and far too often, or at times, I have put it on the back burner. And if it's not fresh in your mind or fresh in your memory, it can so easily, as a parent, we allow things to come in and to crowd out the teaching that would have been proper, or the teaching that should have been taking the time to address and have some dialogue when it comes to the lives of our children. So teaching with purpose is something that takes tremendous amount of perseverance, or wanting to, or realizing that it's important. And I believe that if we do that, we will never regret the time that we have spent to influence the lives of our children, and to teach them with a purpose. So mother's influence in the home is beyond words. I could say this morning, or beyond. It's a mother does a tremendous amount of teaching in the home, or the influence in the home, and I believe that they have. It has been said, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, and if that is true, as a nation, we are maybe in a sad place in history, if that saying perhaps is true. But as we think about a Mother's Day, or as we think about our mothers in our churches today, you are in a era, or in a generation of time that your parent, or possibly most of us in this congregation, that our parents did not have to face. In the day and age that we live in, never before in history, in the home, do we have, or do our mother, or our wives, or the young families of our congregation, never before in history did you have access to whatever interests you in life so readily available. And that brings some degree of concern or concern in my life, as I think about when our children were young, the times that we thought we were busy, but when we have the access to whatever interests you in life so readily available, I fear that at times we as parents, not just mothers, but fathers as well, we have the access to the world when it comes to what interests me, and we can follow that to the degree that you can spend an hour or two following your interests when you come home from work, or even when you're at home, an at-home mother, where you can follow that interest to a degree where the children will suffer or the children are unsupervised and therefore feel somewhat that mother or father's interest is elsewhere. And I just have to be honest, or maybe brutally blunt with you this morning. Our children, our young children, do not care how many friends we have on the social media platform that we enjoy, or how many whatever interest I'm following after, how many people are following me, or who I'm trying to impress. When it comes to the access we have to the world around us, our children could care less as young children who we are trying to impress or what we're trying to follow when we have our interests elsewhere, when we have it so readily available at our fingertips, and we allow this to make inroads into our lives, and therefore our children will suffer when we have possibly an inquisitive child, as Helen would have shared this morning. Back in her day, she said she came from a large family, and I understand that mothers are busy. But today, maybe we would say that maybe we don't have, the large families isn't such a big thing, but we have our interests elsewhere, and it could be just as detrimental to our young children in our homes when we are at home, but we're elsewhere when it comes to following what our interests are, no matter what that may be. I mean, that spectrum can be different for each one of us as fathers or mothers. We spend time in the home, but we're in our own world, following our own thing at the expense of our young children. And I believe that is going to have consequences when we think about a generation that is to come, because they need to make the decisions in their lives too, as well as they decipher and navigate the world at their fingertips. And that is a decision or a temptation or whatever it is that I'm glad I didn't have to face as a youth in my time and in my life. It was not available. Proverbs 10 verse 1 says this: "A wise man maketh a glad father, but a foolish son is the heaviness of his mother." This past week I had the opportunity to go to a cottage meeting, and I had a little bit of dialogue with a few of the older people that came out there, and I was talking to this older lady, just making small talk with her and asking her how her day was going. And then I asked her if she realized that this coming Sunday is Mother's Day, trying to cheer her up a little bit. Well, unbeknownst to me, I was not able to do that. She burst out and cried right there in front of me, and as she cried to me, I had to ask her, well, what's wrong? And all she could say was, my son. And she could hardly talk, and I just had to think there is an elderly mother serving some time in a nursing home, and she has possibly lost maybe all contact with her son. She just said, my son. And she had to cry. And what was I felt so, I was like, here I was trying to cheer her along, that possibly, you're a mother, and that she could have some dialogue. And here, I broke her heart, and she had to cry. And I asked her if I could pray for her. I didn't know the situation. I said, can I pray for you? And she said, yes, you can pray for me. So I prayed that her son, or the relationship between her and her son, could somehow be healed, and that there could be a interaction or a relationship there, as this mom in her twilight years has maybe lost, or like I said, I don't know the situation. But this morning, as I thought about Mother's Day, I did not get her name at the time, but when the nurse came to take her back to her room, she said, Miss Jane, are you ready to go? So this morning, or today, as I was studying for this Mother's Day message, I just had to think about Miss Jane And I said more than one prayer for Miss Jane this morning, that her relationship or her, whatever that burden on her heart was, that even though I was trying to cheer her up, that burden on her heart, whatever that was, that she broke down in tears, that somehow today there would be a connection made between the life of this mother and perhaps her son that is who knows where. So if you have opportunity today at noontime, you can pray for Miss Jane as she might be waiting to hear from a son that she has not heard of for a long time. And as we think about Jesus' relationship with his mother, you know, when Jesus was hanging on the cross, he one of his last words in one of the Gospels, or in John, was this. He said, Jesus loved his mother. He said to his beloved disciple, he said, "Woman, behold thy son." And then he said to the disciple that loved him, he said, "Behold thy mother." Jesus was making provisions for his mother's care as he hung on the cross, as he realized that, yes, this was his earthly mother that gave birth to him or took care of him as an infant. And he made provisions, or he made sure that one of his disciples was going to look out for her as she got older, or as she was the husband was no longer on the scene, so he was making provisions for her as he hung on the cross, facing that cruel death on the cross. He remembered his mother and the women that were there watching as he gave up his last. Some of his last words there on the cross. So as we think about teaching with a purpose, we think about our families, and none, as I shared this morning, nothing earthly is important enough to take my interest or my devotion away from teaching the next generation or being an example for the next generation. Nothing should get in between my devotion or my teaching or my love for the children or the offspring that God has given me. And am I guarding that with passion, or am I guarding that with purpose and teaching with purpose? And I'm preaching to myself as I share. John Wesley was a mover behind the Methodist revival way back in the late 1700s, early 1800s. I just happened to get a book that I would like to read at one time. I was just flipping through it a little bit this week, and I seen a comment he made about his mother. He said this, John Wesley, he says, "My mother managed a discipline which, although austere, was never cruel," meaning strict, was never cruel. "It is important to remember that her instructions related not only to the development of the child through discipline and education, but was profoundly religious as well." She did her best. She was strict, but she was never cruel. She instructed them in the development of discipline and education, but she was profoundly religious as well. And I'm sure that influenced John Wesley's life, as hopefully your mothers and our mothers have done as well. Proverbs 22, verse 6 says this, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." And like I said earlier on in this message, at times it takes us to become maybe quite a bit older than we would like to be till we realize the tremendous amount of wisdom and knowledge and influence that our parents, not only our mothers, had, and that they shared with us when at times we thought they were disconnected from the generation or from the times or the ages that we lived in. So when he is old, he will not depart from it. We have a lot to be thankful for. Let us kneel.